Good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking a few minutes to join us today. We've got some really exciting news to share. Joining me today is Lisa Halley, Innate's newest senior advisor. Lisa brings over 20 years of experience in financial planning, along with a deep expertise in aged care, an area we all know can be a touch complex and overwhelming. But before we go any further, Lisa, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, today, I guess the point of this, Lisa and I were having a bit of a chat. We thought it would be a great opportunity to introduce you to Lisa and let you get to know Lisa and how she thinks, how she works, and probably a bit about Lisa outside of work. So, Lisa, let's start really simple. How did you actually end up in financial advice?
Well, it's been a bit of a convoluted journey. In fact,
Yep.
I started in science and in exercise physiology up in Queensland, actually. I should admit that straight away.
I
But lived here, lived here a long time. But fundamentally, I was working in exercise physiology and then started managing gyms and all-female fitness centres. And as part of having staff, I realised that there was a gap in knowledge. A lot of my staff didn't know about superannuation and whatnot. And managing a business, I thought I'll have a look and study a bit of accounting. Is actually where I started then. Went, that's a bit dry for me. And at the time then moved and saw this thing called financial planning, which was sort of, really starting up back in those days. And yeah, basically realized that I really like to help people make sure they were optimizing their finances and knew the right questions to ask and, could read a statement. And so that's really how I entered the industry. Yeah.
Oh, pretty cool. Pretty cool. It's interesting that you've taken that coaching mindset and applied it to a different outcome, which is kind of cool. I guess thinking about that over time, what's changed most in your approach with clients?
Well, certainly that whole process of helping people get from A to B, back in the day, it was somebody had a health issue or wanted to get fit, had a heart attack or something and needed to take a journey forward with their health and nutrition. But certainly when you apply that to finances, I started, I guess, as quite a detailed scientific kind of person.
Yep.
But what I've realized over the years is whilst I can dive into the detail, really it's about making things simpler for people, giving them confidence to make choices and to not drown in the detail. So that's probably you want to feel confident by knowing all the detail to start with, but you realize often people, what they want from you is not the detail, is the simplification.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Now, all of us have experienced that one moment where we kind of go, yeah, I think I want to get into advice and I think I want to do something from an advice point of view because I think I can add value. What was it for you? What was the thing that happened in your world or that you came across where you thought, yeah, financial planning is for me?
It was really at that time that I was first starting to study the area and at the same time still working in the fitness industry. I used to teach classes elsewhere and I realized I wasn't being paid superannuation. And when I raised it with a
Wow.
couple of people, they didn't even know they were eligible and they were certainly doing a lot more in terms of hours and things than I was. And so when I looked into that and realized there were two approaches, one just to take care of it for myself or another way to make sure everyone else was taken care of and was reviewed, business wide. That was the approach I took. So I guess that felt very unfair that the, people working in a casualised industry missing out. That was a big concern to me. So that was when I realised that people, maybe can't do it themselves or don't have the knowledge to do it themselves and would really value and get benefit from somebody
Yeah.
taking that overview for them.
Yeah, and look, Lisa, I must admit, when you and I first started having conversations, the thing that struck me most was your pursuit of fairness, and your that is a value that you very much subscribe to, and you're very much driven by, and I've seen it even in the limited interactions thus far with clients that we've had so far, and we've had a lot, mind you. I say limited, but we've had a lot too. In that time, your pursuit of fairness is something that you stand by. So that's a credit to you and well done on that space. I guess the question now is, why Innate and why now?
Yeah, so I guess with all these years in the industry and with clients for many, many years, decades even, it's about alignment.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I was looking for the right organization with that right alignment of values, and I'm really looking for a place that has that sort of family orientation and looking for the long-term journey.
Yeah.
Because the joy of our line of work is actually going from somebody thinking about having kids and getting their first mortgage right through to helping them with private school fees or starting their own business, retirement, and my personal favorite is at the other end of life as well. So,
Yeah.
the aged care end of things and making sure that people can deal with the obstacles along the way, have confidence with their decisions, and have a helping hand, somebody to brainstorm with as those obstacles and opportunities come up in life. That's
Mm.
really the pleasure of our work, that it is a long-term journey.
Yeah, no, look, it certainly is a privileged position that we get to share in clients, in their worlds and play in their space and, get to be a little bit disruptive at times too. Yeah, let's say in the sense that some of the stuff we say can be challenging at times, but the reality there is, I guess, we get to share in that success. If clients follow an approach and we get to help them in that way, they get the win, which is awesome, and we get the buzz out of watching them win, which is kind of cool. So you did mention something there, and I'm glad you mentioned it. You mentioned aged care, which is a personal favourite of yours. Aged care is one of those real complex spaces, and we have the government continually moving the goalpost, which is frustrating. And we also have a system which is incredibly underfunded in truth as well. So it's a catch-22, I guess. You made a decision a while back to become a specialist in this space. I'm curious as to understand what was the driving factor there.
Fundamentally, I had a lot of involvement in my childhood with, the older generation. So my nan was an older person in her 90s when I was, 10 and 12, and she spent a lot of time looking after me if I was unwell or school holidays,
Yeah.
which really meant going along with her to hang out with her friends, playing bridge and doing bowls, and she would come to my Stedfords and things and
Yeah.
help look after me. So I just had a lot of interest and respect about her and her friendship circle. And so I think I've just always really connected with people in retirement, but in those later years and some of those challenges, physically that can challenge people later in life. So yeah, just always felt really comfortable in that space. And because of that process of knowing some clients, for 20 plus years, seeing them reach that part of the journey. So
Yeah.
wanting to continue to help and just getting pleasure out of turning something that is complex and full of jargon and sometimes feels very time pressured into something that can be sort of broken down, slow down, and move forward with confidence. And the thing I often find is if we chat with people earlier in their life around their expectations for themselves or for other family members that they might be helping with as well, what their expectations are, what they would like to see happen for themselves and their family before it becomes an emergency. Because sad to say, often home services and aged care residency is preceded by health events.
Yeah.
And it can feel urgent, and the hospital's trying to move you out. And so bad decisions can be made. So slowing that down, breaking it down, doing it in steps, and focusing on, like, settling in with health and where you're living rather than rushing into financial decision making. That's what I love to do.
Yeah, and that's an interesting take too, in the sense that what you're essentially saying is that there's a lot of value in having these discussions well and truly in advance. And so from a client's perspective, and look, none of us want to go into aged care. Like, hand up, none of us want to do that, and we all want to have that, that wonderful life where we live, and then one day we just don't wake up the next morning and everything's great. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
Mm.
So I guess what you're saying is, in order to avoid getting caught out, preparing in advance, having the discussions, knowing what it could potentially look like, and perhaps refreshing those discussions on a regular basis is really important.
Yeah, and that's why, meeting regularly with people and touching on those issues from time to time. Sometimes it's, in the headlines and uh, there's, a lot of discussion, and that's a great reason it's in people's heads. But making sure the foundations, I mean, fundamentally, whether you're a younger person seeking advice, or an older person, making sure all the foundations are in place. So if an emergency happens, something untoward happens, or an obstacle comes up, you know that the foundations are in place. And so it takes a lot of stress and concern away. It's often not the, sexy part of financial planning is the foundations. But it fundamentally is, if that's strong, then building on top of that,
Of course.
is going to be viable.
Yeah, of course. Lisa, one of the things, and obviously, from an aged care specialty point of view, like obviously we've got the qualifications, or I've got them myself as well. So I know how difficult these conversations can be. If we think about this, I'm just curious, how do you, with aged care, there's competing interests. There's kids involved. There's kids are trying to do the best thing by their parents. So there might also be a spouse as well. There's so many things intersecting here. How do you go about handling the what is a mishmash of competing interests, I dare say?
Yeah, well, fundamentally, it's about everybody having the hat on, right?
Yeah.
For mum or dad or whoever it is who's needing the help. Ideally, I like to get them involved, even if, they're in care and not that interested in the financials, just to understand, their perspective and point of view. Even if they've got helpers for, the more detailed element of it. But if everybody focuses on keeping the right hat on, acting in the best interests of that person and making the decisions as if they were that person, then it's a much easier job. Sometimes people do need a little bit more of a reminder about that. They've got their own views about what should happen with them, maybe it's a house or a share portfolio or something like that. But fundamentally, if we just keep the focus on the family member going into care and doing what they would like to see done, what they demonstrated in in their lifetime, and then that really just keeps everybody focused.
Of course, of course. Yeah. Look, I think you're absolutely spot on and on point on that one. The other thing that I also love is your reference to the hat. It's something that we're continually having to remind clients of, and not because they're doing anything untoward. More often than not, they're in a frazzled state, and they don't know how to respond at times. Now, Lisa, it would be remiss of us not to understand what happens to Lisa's world outside of work, because we know you're a brilliant advisor. We know you're a specialist in aged care from that point of view. But if we shift gears slightly from that end, what does Lisa do outside of work? What sort of entertainment does she look forward to, and how does she de-stress from a fairly intense Monday to Friday?
Yeah, look, I'm a pretty busy person on the weekends. I love cultural things. So my husband's a musician. He's from Argentina, and we met through tango actually. So
nice.
But I love to dance many different styles and just having a great time out on the dance floor. We go to a lot of music events. I like, going to the Writers' Festival every year. My husband loves photography, so we're often out taking photographs of buildings and infrastructure. And when the metro tunnels sort of was launched, we were there on day one with my husband taking photos. Trying to learn Spanish. Love obviously the gym and yoga and in the park, and a range of sort of exercise activities other than just dance. So look, I keep busy. Starts at 7:30 on Saturday morning with a Spanish class every week, and it's always keeping out of mischief is what I like to say.
So I dare say that come weekends there isn't much spare time. Would that be a fair observation?
My husband would prefer if we sat on the couch and drank our matecito every Sunday morning, but we are at the gym. Let me tell you, that's I keep him in tip-top shape too.
Oh my Lord, oh my Lord. I had this vision of you with a rose and and one of those black and white t-shirts, the striped t-shirts. So I'm not sure why from that point of view. Okay, cool. Lisa, thinking about clients and who when they engage with you and so on, what might those clients expect?
Well, I guess I really want to dig down into what drives them, what their ideal life is like, and trying to make that achievable. Sometimes there are challenges in reaching that ideal situation. And sometimes actually people come obviously with obstacles that they're facing right now. So
Yep.
it could be the redundancy, the divorce, a health event. So that is often an initial sticking point to work through. Also, though, sometimes people are coming, particularly couples, needing to get onto the same page and actually trying to get them to brainstorm what the ideal life of the future looks like is actually part of the what we need to help them do.
Yeah.
And people are often on different pages there. So I think that trying that can often take a couple of years for some people to really get comfortable, build trust with people, build trust with the ideas. And, even when we can show someone, maybe they're coming for retirement advice that they can afford to retire or when they can, or help answer the question of, can I go part-time and how much do I need to earn? Those sorts of issues. Sometimes it still, takes people time to feel confident to act. And fundamentally, that's the goal, give confidence for people to be able to act in their life. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Look, and I think just listening to you speak there, clearly your focus is very much on the context rather than the content.
Mhm.
The understanding the why and trying to get to that point. And it's really that's from an advisory point of view, that's probably one of the hardest skills to master. Because anyone can say, well, look, how much money do you have in the bank, or what do you have in your super, and all that. And, any goose can do that. But the reality is, trying to understand the reasons why a person behaves the way they do, or they might act the way they do, and trying to explore that, I think is really tough. Um, I guess from that point of view, Lisa, and just mindful of time, if there was one thing that our clients could take away from today, what would you say?
Well, I just really look forward to meeting everyone
Yep.
and establishing some long-term future relationships. Yeah, that's what I've enjoyed. Some clients are coming along with me on this journey for, the 20-year clients, etc., continuing on board. But I'm looking forward to meeting new people with new issues and new challenges ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, Lisa, on my behalf and on behalf of Innate Wealth, we are absolutely thrilled to have you with us. I think you are going to be an amazing contributor to the success of our clients and to the success of their outcomes from that point of view in terms of both capability and the other thing there too. And I think probably two skills that don't get mentioned often enough, but a high degree of empathy and humility that you have, and you have that in spades, and the way you go about doing your work and so on. In the limited time that we've been together, just watching you, you're very much an old sage in the way you go about doing things, and it's a lovely approach to see. So look, I think for our clients, all I can do is encourage you when you do pop in. Make sure you say hello to Lisa. For those of you who are fortunate enough to work with Lisa, you are going to be over the moon. And I'm certain, say it's definitely a lift up on what you probably had up until now. No, not in a bad way, but boys are boys. So from that point of view, so I think there is some value there. But look, once again, Lisa, thank you for spending a bit of time with me, and thank you for getting to know our clients as well.
Fantastic.
All right, lovely to see everyone. Take care, and we'll chat soon. Cheers.